They found it in the most unlikely place, buried under decades of secrecy, tucked away where only one man had access. A single handwritten letter, penned by Diana, Princess of Wales, just weeks before her tragic death, now sent shockwaves through the hearts of her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. At 43, both men stared at the fragile paper, hands trembling, their eyes wide with disbelief. She knew exactly what was coming, and he did nothing. The words hung heavy in the air, echoing the fears that had tormented them for years. But what was in that letter? Why had King Charles hidden it away for 3 decades, allowing pain, confusion, and betrayal to fester in silence? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine discovering a secret about your own mother, something so shocking it shatters your understanding of the past. That's exactly what Harry and William faced. The kind of secret that doesn't just alter your memories, it redefines your entire life narrative. A revelation that forces you to question every conversation, every gesture, every act of kindness or cruelty you thought you understood. And for two men who grew up under the relentless scrutiny of the world, this was a revelation that carried both the weight of grief and the fire of anger. It began with whispers in the palace. An archivist, someone who had worked quietly behind the doors of Buckingham, had stumbled across a collection of documents, long forgotten or deliberately concealed. Among them lay the letter, penned with Diana's unmistakable elegance and clarity. The first lines were almost casual, deceptively ordinary, betraying none of the storm that was to follow. Yet as they read further, the words became chilling, foretelling, almost prophetic. She spoke of fear, of betrayal, of being silenced. And she named names. She hinted at dangers that her sons could hardly imagine, dangers lurking within the very walls that were supposed to be a sanctuary. William's hands shook as he traced the delicate handwriting. He remembered the last time he had seen his mother alive, her laughter hiding the anxiety in her eyes, the way she leaned into him, offering a hug that felt both protective and apologetic. How could he have known that she had been living with such fear, with such calculated understanding of her fate? Harry, sitting beside him, clenched his fists, jaw tight, anger simmering beneath the surface. He felt an overwhelming mixture of grief, rage, and betrayal. For years, they had carried the weight of their mother's death, never truly knowing the depths of what had been concealed from them. And now, at 43, the truth had finally emerged. What would you do if you uncovered a letter like this? If someone you trusted implicitly had deliberately hidden knowledge that could have changed everything? Could you forgive them? Or would the betrayal burn too deeply to ever heal? These are questions William and Harry grappled with, questions that few in the world could understand, yet questions that resonate universally, because who hasn't felt the sting of a secret that changes everything? The letter revealed not only Diana's fears, but also her acute awareness of the machinery of power surrounding her. She described the intricate web of loyalty and deceit, the subtle manipulations that had left her isolated. She wrote of her intuition that certain actions would be taken to control her, to silence her voice, and to manage her narrative even in death. Every word was deliberate, each sentence a puzzle, a warning, a message intended for the sons she loved so fiercely. And all this time, the very person who should have protected her, the father of her children, chose concealment over confrontation. King Charles, a man whose public image had always been meticulously managed, now faced scrutiny not just from the world, but from his own family. The discovery of this letter was more than a familial shock. It was a reckoning. How could decades of secrecy go unnoticed by those closest to the throne? How could one letter, hidden away for 30 years, carry the weight of revelations that shook the foundation of an entire family? And most importantly, what does it mean for the men who have lived their entire lives in the shadow of these events? As Harry and William read, memories of their childhood flooded back. The endless cameras, the public appearances, the orchestrated smiles masking private pain. They remembered being shuttled between homes, guided by staff who obeyed orders without question, shielded from truths that now seemed painfully obvious. They remembered the confusion, the unanswered questions, the nights lying awake, wondering why things had happened the way they did. And now, finally, the missing pieces had been found. But with each piece came more questions. Questions about loyalty, about love, about the cost of silence. The brothers exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of what they were about to face. This wasn't just a letter. It was a key to understanding a lifetime of mystery and grief. It was proof that their mother had been more perceptive, more courageous, and more alone than anyone had ever realized. And it was proof that the man they had trusted most, their father, had chosen discretion over honesty, secrecy over transparency, protection over confrontation. But the story doesn't end with just the letter. The uncovering of this document set off a chain reaction of emotions, memories, and decisions. Interviews were scheduled, advisors consulted, lawyers briefed. The palace, usually a bastion of order and control, now trembled under the weight of history coming to light. Public speculation exploded as media outlets clamored to understand the implications. Social media erupted with theories, accusations, and expressions of shock. And amidst this chaos, William and Harry faced a more intimate and painful challenge, reconciling their love for their mother with the reality of the betrayal that had shadowed her final days. Audience, think for a moment about the idea of being betrayed by someone you should trust completely, by someone whose decisions or indecisions alter the course of your life irrevocably. Now imagine the scale magnified to a global stage, where every emotion, every action, every response is scrutinized by millions. This was the reality for Harry and William, as they navigated the storm brought on by a simple piece of paper, a letter that had waited silently for 30 years to be discovered. The letter contained a warning that echoed through every line. Beware of those who will manipulate. Beware of those who will prioritize image over truth. Beware of silence in the face of injustice. And as Harry read aloud one of the most haunting passages, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion, William felt tears sting his eyes. She knew, and he did nothing, they whispered in unison. The words were simple, yet they reverberated like thunder, shaking the foundations of their understanding of family, loyalty, and the monarchy itself. And here lies the ultimate question. What happens when decades of silence collide with truth? How do you confront the ghosts of the past, the decisions made by those you love, and the betrayal that was hidden in plain sight? For Harry and William, this was no longer theoretical. It was real, it was immediate, and it demanded action. The letter was more than a relic of history. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited the confrontation with a truth long denied. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if you discovered a message from your mother, written just weeks before her death, that no one ever wanted you to see? One that could rewrite everything you thought you knew about your family, your past, and the very man who raised you? This was the exact moment Harry and William found themselves in. The palace had always been a place of secrets, but this letter, it wasn't just a secret. It was a revelation, a time capsule of fear, foresight, and heartbreak that had been deliberately locked away for 30 years. The letter had been tucked into a dusty envelope, almost invisible amidst the piles of papers in King Charles's private vault. It wasn't flagged, it wasn't catalogued, and it certainly wasn't meant for discovery. The archivist who found it described the moment as surreal. It was like the air shifted, he recalled. You could feel the weight of what had been hidden all those years. And he was right. The weight wasn't in the paper itself. It was in the words written, the warnings left for two sons who had spent their entire lives trying to understand why their mother's world had been so full of fear. Harry was the first to pick it up. He traced the handwriting with a trembling finger, each curve of Diana's letters feeling impossibly familiar. He remembered her touch, her voice, her warmth, and suddenly it all collided with the realization that she had known. She had seen the storm coming, and she had tried to prepare them. William, standing beside him, felt a knot of anger and sorrow tighten in his chest. The kind of anger that didn't scream. It simmered, steady, and consuming. He wanted answers. He wanted to scream, to demand, to break something. Instead, he just read, absorbing each sentence, each subtle plea, each warning. The letter began innocuously. A few sentences about her day, her thoughts, a smile she had shared in private with friends. But then, subtly, the tone shifted. Words grew sharper, precise, almost surgical. She wrote about her fears. She wrote about those she trusted and those she didn't. She wrote about the palace, about power, about control, and about the chilling realization that her voice might be silenced. The sentences were short, deliberate, almost like a countdown. And for Harry and William, it was impossible not to read them as both prophecy and accusation. Do you ever think about the secrets your parents kept from you? The things they never said, the warnings they left unsaid? Now imagine that silence stretched over decades. The weight becomes unbearable, doesn't it? That was the reality for Harry and William as they read their mother's words. And yet, there was also awe. Even in the face of danger, even in the suffocating isolation she felt, Diana's intellect and foresight shone through. She had a plan, a way of leaving her sons a map for navigating a world she feared they would never fully understand. The letter didn't just speak of fear. It contained specific observations, coded warnings about people in her life who might not have had her best interests at heart. Some names were familiar, whispered in family conversations, in hushed tones during public appearances. Others were not. She predicted actions, outlined manipulations, and even suggested consequences that could ripple decades into the future. It was almost unbearable to read. How could someone so young, so surrounded by both love and power, see all of this with such clarity, and yet be powerless to prevent it? Harry slammed the envelope down, frustration and grief coiling through him. "Why wasn't this ever shown to us?" he demanded, voice breaking. "Why was it hidden? Why did Father, keep this from us?" William said nothing at first. He couldn't. The answer was obvious, and yet impossible to accept. For years, the brothers had trusted their father, sought his guidance, and looked to him for protection. And now, all that trust felt poisoned, because the very person who should have shielded Diana, and by extension them, had concealed her last warnings, leaving them exposed to a world of lies, speculation, and heartbreak. The palace was quiet, eerily so. Outside, the usual hum of London life carried on, oblivious to the revelation unfolding within. But inside, the air was thick with tension, history, and betrayal. This wasn't just a private family matter anymore. The discovery of the letter had seismic implications. It challenged the narrative the royal family had carefully maintained for decades. It exposed fractures that had been hidden behind polite smiles, public appearances, and official statements. And it demanded answers, ones that no one seemed willing or able to provide. William finally spoke, voice low but steady. "She trusted us with her life in a way we didn't even realize," he said. "She left us this, and yet we never had the chance to act on it." 30 years of silence. Harry's fists tightened, and all that time he knew what she feared, and he did nothing. The words echoed through the ornate room like a verdict, a judgment, a confession. And yet, there was no relief in speaking them aloud. Just the realization that the truth had always been there, patiently waiting to be uncovered, and that it carried a pain sharper than anything they had ever experienced. The contents of the letter began to unravel the fabric of their childhood memories. They remembered moments that now seemed orchestrated, conversations that took on new meaning, gestures that were no longer simple acts of love, but calculated maneuvers in a world that had always been more dangerous than they understood. Every memory was filtered through the lens of this revelation, twisting and reshaping their understanding of Diana, of Charles, of themselves. And yet, there was more. The letter hinted at even deeper truths, fragments of information that, if revealed, could change the public's perception of the royal family forever. Names that had never surfaced in tabloids, incidents that had been quietly swept under the rug, patterns of behavior that had been invisible to everyone but Diana herself. Her words were meticulous, deliberate, almost chilling in their precision. They painted a portrait not just of fear, but of foresight. A mother preparing her children for a storm she could see, even as the rest of the world remained blind. As they read, Harry and William realized something else. This letter was more than a message to them. It was a mirror, reflecting the failures of the family, the systemic issues of secrecy and control, and the consequences of choosing image over truth. And with that reflection came a sense of urgency. The revelations could not remain buried any longer. The world needed to know. And more importantly, They needed to confront the man who had chosen to keep this hidden for decades. Audience, imagine holding a document like this. Imagine the trembling in your hands, the ache in your chest, the swirl of emotions, grief, anger, betrayal, awe, disbelief. How would you respond? What questions would you ask? And more importantly, would you ever find closure knowing that someone you trusted had deliberately kept the truth from you for 30 years? And as the brothers placed the letter carefully on the table, neither could shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. One letter had emerged from a vault, but what else had been hidden all this time? What other truths lay buried, waiting to be discovered? What consequences would follow when decades of secrecy collided with the unrelenting truth? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What was it like to live under the constant shadow of fear, even when the world saw only glamour, grace, and smiles? For Diana, Princess of Wales, the final weeks of her life were a labyrinth of anxiety, secrecy, and quiet despair. The letter her sons had just discovered didn't arrive in isolation. It was a reflection of a life lived in vigilance, in strategy, in anticipation of threats both seen and unseen. Every word she wrote, every line, carried the weight of someone who knew her days were numbered, someone who understood that her voice could be muted at any moment. And in those last weeks, that reality pressed harder than ever against her chest. Diana had become a master of duality. To the public, she was radiant, a picture of poise, engaging with charity events, smiling for the cameras, and performing the role of a princess with effortless elegance. Yet behind closed doors, she was anxious, calculating, terrified that someone would silence her before she could secure the safety of her children or the truth she knew needed to be heard. Imagine walking through life with every glance, every conversation, every interaction weighed against potential danger. That was her reality. Her diary entries from those weeks reveal a woman both courageous and haunted. In one line, she writes of attending a public function with a composed smile, while in another, she confesses to sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling, heart racing with the fear of unseen threats. She described moments of paranoia, feeling eyes upon her when no one was there, imagining conspiracies in every whisper, every closed door. And yet, there was clarity, too, a razor-sharp awareness of the manipulations and machinations that surrounded her. She saw the world through lenses her children could only later come to appreciate. Harry and William, reading the letter, were struck by the precision of her warnings. She didn't ramble or panic. She documented, she analyzed, she prepared. The letter contained references to meetings, to conversations, to individuals whose intentions were far from pure. She wrote of her concern that her every move was being monitored, that her actions were being orchestrated, and that the palace itself could not be trusted to act in her interest. Can you imagine the isolation of knowing that even the people closest to you might be aligned against your safety? For Diana, this was the unbearable truth. In those last weeks, Diana was also a mother in crisis mode. She worried constantly about William and Harry, sensing that the world was too complex, too treacherous, for them to navigate alone. The letter wasn't just a warning to them. It was a manual, a guide, a cryptic roadmap for surviving the forces that she believed would ultimately seek to control or harm her. She wrote with urgency, as though every word might be her last chance to speak across time to the sons she loved. And in doing so, she revealed a side of herself that the public never saw. The side of Diana that was vigilant, strategic, and painfully aware of her mortality. There were also moments of defiance. Diana's words reveal that she refused to be completely cowed, refusing to let fear dominate her decisions entirely. She continued to advocate for charitable causes, meet with friends, and maintain her public responsibilities with unwavering professionalism. Yet every interaction was calculated. Every smile, every handshake, every conversation was filtered through a lens of potential risk. Even a simple gesture could be scrutinized, weaponized, or used as evidence of vulnerability. The tension between her public composure and private anxiety created a dissonance that must have been exhausting. William and Harry, reading these revelations decades later, felt a tidal wave of emotion. They remembered snippets of that period. The last Christmas with their mother, her laughter during quiet moments, the fleeting warmth of hugs that now seemed laden with unspoken warnings. They realized that much of her behavior had been guided not just by the pressures of royal life, but by an acute awareness of danger, by a need to protect them even as she herself faced threats she could not escape. The letter was proof of that foresight, proof that she had been thinking of them, planning for them, even in the moments when the world saw only a princess performing for cameras. One of the most harrowing revelations was how Diana documented her sense of being silenced. She wrote of conversations that had been deliberately misrepresented, of events orchestrated to portray her as unstable or reckless. She referenced warnings about the consequences of speaking out, about the ways her reputation could be weaponized against her. And she did so with a clarity that left Harry and William reeling. The letter was not vague, it was prescriptive. It told them what she feared, who she feared, and what they should watch for. It was a chilling premonition, made even more poignant by the reality that she would not live to see its wisdom validated. Audience, think for a moment about the courage it takes to write such a letter, to document fear, to outline danger, knowing full well that your words could never be acted upon in time. How many of us could face our mortality with such precision, such foresight, and such love for those we leave behind? Diana did it. She did it because she understood that her voice might be silenced, but her intentions could still guide her children. And that is the level of bravery that Harry and William were now confronting for the first time in their adult lives. In addition to fear, the letter revealed Diana's acute awareness of the people around her. She had named names, hinted at motives, and left breadcrumbs for her sons to follow decades later. It was as if she had constructed a game of truth, leaving pieces scattered, trusting that when the time was right, her children would find them and understand the stakes. That level of foresight is almost unimaginable. Most parents leave behind love letters or advice. Diana left behind a carefully constructed warning system, a guide through the treacheries of a world that had proven itself capable of cruelty. As William read further, he felt a rush of anger and guilt. How had they missed the signs? How had they not understood her fears when she was alive? And yet, the letter also offered a form of closure, a sense that Diana had done everything within her power to protect them, to prepare them, to arm them with knowledge. It was a bittersweet realization. Pride in her foresight, pain in the understanding of what could not be undone. In those final weeks, Diana's life was a study in contradiction. She was both terrified and defiant, vulnerable yet strategic, isolated yet intensely connected to the people she loved most. Every word of the letter was a testament to her intelligence, her bravery, and her deep maternal love. Harry and William, for the first time, could fully comprehend the full scope of her situation, the complexity of her final days, and the deliberate concealment that had prevented them from acting sooner. And as they closed the letter, the room seemed to contract around them. The weight of decades of secrecy, the betrayal of silence, and the brilliance of their mother's foresight all collided. They realized this letter was more than a document. It was a legacy, a challenge, and a call to action. It demanded answers, demanded reckoning, and demanded that the truth finally see the light of day. But what Diana had written was only the beginning. The letter hinted at dangers that were still present, individuals whose actions could no longer remain hidden, and secrets so deep that revealing them could change everything Harry and William thought they knew about their family. One name, in particular, struck them with a force that neither brother was prepared for. A revelation that would ignite a storm far larger than the personal grief they were grappling with. And what came next would not only alter their perception of the past, but also challenge the very foundation of what it meant to be part of the royal family. What kind of place holds secrets so powerful, so damning, that even the people closest to you are barred from entry? For decades, King Charles's private vault had been exactly that. A fortress of secrecy, a repository for documents, letters, and evidence meant never to see the light of day. And among its carefully guarded contents lay the letter from Diana, the very letter that had just shattered William and Harry's understanding of the past. The vault was more than a room. It was a symbol, a statement, a warning of the lengths to which those in power would go to control narratives and protect reputations. Imagine a chamber lined with polished wood, reinforced steel doors, and biometric locks that only one man could access. The air inside is heavy, carrying the faint scent of aged paper, ink, and dust. Shelves stretch floor to ceiling, packed with folders, leather-bound ledgers, and stacks of letters dating back decades. Every item cataloged with precision, every detail accounted for, or so it seemed. The letter from Diana, however, had managed to hide in plain sight, overlooked by assistants, archivists, and aides, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It was a ticking time bomb, and now that it had been discovered, the ramifications were immense. Harry was the first to speak as they stepped into the room for the first time. All these secrets, how could he think we wouldn't find them one day? His voice was tight, brittle with emotion. William didn't respond immediately. Instead, he surveyed the vault, taking in the enormity of what it represented. Every shelf, every folder, every document was a piece of a puzzle that had been intentionally concealed. It was a stark reminder of how much power and control had been wielded behind closed doors, beyond the reach of the public, the press, and even family members. The brothers began to examine the area where the letter had been discovered. There was no grand fanfare, no hidden compartments or secret codes. It had simply been misfiled, or perhaps deliberately misplaced. That realization brought a shiver. The vault wasn't just a storage space. It was a curated narrative, a way to control what people knew, what they didn't, and how the past would be remembered. For 30 years, this room had been a stage for concealment, and Diana's letter was the first act in a drama that was only now unfolding. What would you do if you realized someone you trusted had an entire room dedicated to hiding truths from you? Could you even begin to comprehend the scale of control and deception? Harry and William felt a mix of awe and horror. The vault was impressive, certainly, but it was also a stark illustration of the gulf between perception and reality. For decades, they had been shielded from the full truth, allowed to navigate a world built on selective disclosure, and now they were seeing the machinery behind it. The letter itself was more than just words on paper. It was a time capsule of fear, strategy, and maternal foresight. Yet what struck the brothers most was not only what Diana had written, but where it had been kept. King Charles's vault was intended to protect, to secure, and to conceal. It was a manifestation of control, a place where inconvenient truths were buried. And for 30 years, Diana's insights, her warnings, her cries for understanding had lain hidden, a silent testament to what she had feared most. As they looked around, memories of the palace flooded back. The corridors, the hidden rooms, the private studies, all spaces designed for appearances, protocol, and hierarchy. The vault was the ultimate expression of that system. An invisible engine that decided what was remembered and what was forgotten. Harry felt a rising tide of anger. How could so much have been kept from them? How could their mother's intelligence, her warnings, and her foresight have been deliberately locked away, removed from the hands of the very people she loved most? William, calmer but no less affected, reminded Harry of the stakes. "This isn't just about anger," he said quietly. "It's about understanding what was at risk, what she feared, and what we need to do now." But even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice, the sense of violation that came from realizing how much had been hidden, not just from them, but from the world. Every document in this vault had a story. Every folder contained decisions, manipulations, and omissions that had shaped lives. And the letter from Diana was a spark capable of igniting all of it. Audience, imagine walking into a room and realizing that for decades, it has contained answers to questions you didn't even know to ask. How would you react? Would you feel empowered by the knowledge, or crushed by the enormity of what had been concealed? For Harry and William, it was both. The vault represented the ultimate paradox, a place of preservation and betrayal, protection and deception. As they delved further, other documents caught their attention. There were correspondences with advisors, financial records, and notes that hinted at even more secrets. Patterns emerged, suggesting that the concealment of Diana's letter was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader strategy to control information. It became clear that the letter's discovery was just the beginning. There were other truths waiting to surface, truths that could reshape history and challenge the narrative that the world had accepted for decades. Harry ran his hand over the vault's smooth wooden shelves, imagining the years of silence that had passed, the moments when his mother's fears could have been addressed, but were instead buried in secrecy. William's gaze lingered on the locked compartments, wondering what else might be hidden, what other warnings, what other truths had been deliberately kept from them. The emotional weight of the realization pressed down with a force that made it hard to breathe. And then there was the question that neither brother could shake. Why? Why keep a letter like this hidden? Why let fear, manipulation, and control dictate what a family could know about their own history? The answer was complex, tangled with decades of royal tradition, image management, and personal relationships. But for Harry and William, the immediate reality was clear. The vault had been a barrier, a deliberate obstruction between them and the truth their mother had fought so hard to leave behind. The letter's placement in the vault also revealed the stakes of silence. If it had been found earlier, if the warnings had been heeded, perhaps events could have unfolded differently. Perhaps the trajectory of their lives, their mother's final months, and even the decisions of those in power might have been altered. But now, decades later, the letter was in their hands, and the consequences of its concealment were starkly clear. And yet, the vault was more than just a repository of secrets. It was a challenge. It demanded action. It dared them to confront the past, to question authority, and to seek the truth. Every document they uncovered reinforced the urgency. Every hidden page a reminder that what had been kept from them could no longer remain hidden. But what came next in that vault, beyond Diana's letter, would reveal a depth of secrecy that neither Harry nor William could have imagined. The next discovery was poised to change not only their understanding of the past, but also the future of the family they thought they knew. What would it feel like to finally confront a truth you had unknowingly been searching for your entire life? For Harry and William, the moment of discovery in King Charles's vault was more than just an unveiling of secrets. It was an emotional earthquake. The letter from Diana had already shifted the ground beneath them, but as they pieced together the context, the scope of what had been hidden began to sink in. This was not merely a personal revelation. It was a reckoning that spanned decades, filled with betrayal, foresight, and the chilling realization that the world they thought they knew had been meticulously curated by those in power. Harry picked up the fragile letter again, his fingers trembling as he unfolded it carefully, almost reverently. Each line carried the weight of a mother's foresight, each paragraph a warning of threats they had never understood at the time. And yet, the most striking part wasn't the fear or the danger she described, it was her precision. Diana had anticipated not only the challenges she would face, but also how those challenges might ripple into her son's lives long after her death. Harry's heart raced. She knew everything, he whispered. She saw it all coming. William's expression was harder to read, a mix of disbelief and suppressed fury. He had always admired his mother's intelligence and resilience, but seeing it laid out in black and white, decades after the fact, brought a torrent of conflicting emotions. Pride in her foresight, anger at the concealment, grief over all the years they had spent unaware, and, most piercingly, betrayal. How could the very man who was supposed to protect her have allowed her fears to go unaddressed, leaving her vulnerable, exposed, and ultimately silenced? The brothers began to talk, the words tumbling out in bursts. Harry recalled moments from their childhood, the odd silences, the carefully measured statements, the glances that now seemed loaded with unspoken truths. "We were never meant to see this," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "It was all carefully hidden, calculated. And for what? To protect an image? To avoid a scandal?" William shook his head slowly, the weight of decades of secrecy pressing down on him. "It wasn't just about protection," he replied. "It was control. Absolute control. And we've just been handed the proof." Audience, think about the concept of control masquerading as protection. How often do those closest to us make decisions behind closed doors, believing they know what's best, only for us to discover years later that their choices were motivated by self-interest, fear, or manipulation? For Harry and William, the answer was clear. The letter was a lifeline, but it was also a mirror reflecting a system designed to shape perception, suppress truth, and manipulate outcomes. As they pored over the letter, the emotional weight of Diana's foresight became palpable. She had documented not only her fears, but also the identities of those who might exploit her vulnerability. Her words were careful, deliberate, almost coded, leaving clues that would only make sense decades later. Harry's anger flared as he realized how meticulously she had predicted potential betrayals. The realization that she had been aware of threats within her inner circle made the concealment by Charles even more infuriating. How could someone in a position of power, a father, allow such a warning to remain buried for so long? William, typically the calmer of the two, felt an unexpected surge of guilt. He remembered the public pressure they had both endured as children. The scrutiny, the expectations, the unrelenting media attention. But he hadn't realized how deeply the personal betrayals had been woven into that pressure, how much had been deliberately hidden from them. The vault, the letter, and the layers of secrecy revealed a world where knowledge was power and ignorance was maintained intentionally. The brothers began to reconstruct the timeline, piecing together events from Diana's final weeks and the decisions made, or not made, by those around her. Each revelation painted a more complete picture. Moments of isolation, subtle manipulations, and orchestrated appearances designed to maintain the facade of stability while danger lurked beneath. The letter served as a lens through which all prior experiences could be reevaluated, and the clarity it brought was both illuminating and devastating. Harry slammed the vault door shut behind him, pacing as the weight of decades-long deception settled in. "She tried to warn us," he said, voice cracking. "And he ignored it. He buried it. 30 years, William. 30 years of hiding the truth from us." William stood still, staring at the rows of documents, the quiet hum of the palace around them. "And it's not just about us," he replied softly. "It's about the world. About history. About what people think they know. Every lie that's been allowed to stand, it changes everything." Audience, have you ever uncovered a secret that redefined not only your past, but also your understanding of the present? How does one process a truth that's been hidden for decades, one that reframes every memory, every relationship, every assumption you've held? Harry and William were grappling with this exact question, the weight of it pressing on them from every angle. As the hours passed, the brothers examined the details with painstaking care. Diana's handwriting was meticulous, each word placed with purpose. She had outlined not only fears but potential actions, moments of caution, and the precise nature of the threats she anticipated. It was clear that she had been thinking not only about survival, but also about legacy. Every warning was a step toward ensuring her children could navigate a world she would not live to protect them in. The depth of her strategic thinking left Harry and William in awe, and added a bitter edge to their anger at the man who had suppressed it. There was also a personal reckoning. Harry remembered his own feelings of inadequacy, the sense that he had missed crucial moments in understanding his mother. William thought of his public persona, the measured demeanor that had shielded him from scrutiny, now challenged by the revelations he held in his hands. Both men realized that the letter was not only a roadmap to the past, but also a catalyst for confronting their own emotions, regrets, and unspoken fears. Then, amidst the letters, files, and folders, they found more clues, smaller notes and documents that Diana had written in secrecy. There were references to meetings, encounters, and personal observations that added layers to her warnings. Each note amplified the sense of forethought, a meticulously crafted safety net of knowledge meant to guide them, protect them, and inform them long after she was gone. It was as if she had left them breadcrumbs through time, trusting that when the moment came, they would understand the map she had laid out. William's voice broke the silence, quiet but cutting. "We've spent our entire lives searching for answers. And now, finally, we have them. But the truth is heavier than I imagined. And it doesn't stop here." Harry's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "it doesn't. Because what Diana foresaw, the danger, the manipulation, it's still alive. It's still here. And now we have to face it." The letter, the vault, and the surrounding evidence had created a storm of revelation, one that could not be contained within the walls of Buckingham or the confines of their own memories. The questions that had been silently gnawing at them for decades were now screaming, demanding action, understanding, and confrontation. And as they looked at each other, both brothers knew that their next steps would not just affect their personal understanding of the past, but could also challenge the foundations of the family, the monarchy, and public perception itself. But what came next, hidden within the shadows of the vault and hinted at by Diana's careful words, would reveal a betrayal deeper and more personal than either Harry or William could have anticipated, and it would change the course of their lives forever. What if the words you thought were simple cautions turned out to be intricate warnings, carefully coded and strategically placed to protect you long before you understood the danger? That was exactly what Harry and William discovered as they dug deeper into Diana's letter. Every line, every punctuation mark, every carefully chosen phrase revealed a level of foresight and precision that neither brother had fully comprehended until now. This was more than a mother's farewell. It was a tactical roadmap, a warning system laid out with love, care, and unflinching clarity. The first thing that struck Harry was the subtlety. Diana didn't just write, "Be careful," or "Trust no one." She hinted, she implied, she used language that required thought and reflection. Names were alluded to, actions predicted, consequences outlined. Each warning was layered, almost like a puzzle, meant to be understood decades later when the sons were mature enough to decode it. She wasn't just afraid, Harry said aloud, voice tight with emotion. She was planning. She was trying to keep us safe, even after she was gone. William ran his hands through his hair, scanning the page again. He realized that many of the seemingly innocuous anecdotes, the stories about charity events, dinners, and public appearances, were carefully selected examples meant to illustrate deeper truths. Diana had embedded lessons in everyday moments, showing them how to navigate the treacherous waters of a world ruled by image, protocol, and manipulation. It was brilliance and heartbreak intertwined. The letter was a testament to her intelligence, her love, and her acute understanding of danger. But there were contradictions too, subtle ones that made the brothers pause. Diana spoke of people she loved and trusted, yet she warned that even the closest could betray, manipulate, or silence her. She expressed hope and confidence in certain figures, yet suggested vigilance even toward them. The emotional complexity of her writing was staggering. She had lived in a world where trust was conditional, love was complicated, and safety was never guaranteed. For Harry and William, reading these lines decades later felt like piecing together a code meant to keep them alive and aware in a world that had tried to obscure the truth. Audience, have you ever received a warning so carefully crafted that its full meaning only became apparent years later? One that seemed ordinary at first, but revealed hidden depth upon closer inspection? Diana's letters were exactly that, a masterclass in foresight, written under immense pressure, designed to outsmart forces she feared were working against her. And the irony was brutal. The very person who should have acted on her warnings chose silence instead. As they continued reading, Harry noticed a recurring pattern. Diana's words weren't just about fear, they were instructions. Small, precise, and layered. Each paragraph offered guidance on how to approach people, how to interpret actions, and how to discern truth from deception. She had written about loyalty tests, about subtle signs that revealed intentions, and about behaviors that, if ignored, could lead to catastrophic consequences. And all of it was written with her children in mind, a gift of knowledge meant to arm them for a future she knew they would inherit without her. William's voice broke the silence. "She's basically left us a survival guide," he said, almost in awe. "A manual for understanding not just the people in our lives, but the system itself. And it's terrifying, because it proves she saw everything. The manipulation, the control, the threats. And he did nothing." His words hung in the air like a judgment, echoing the betrayal that had haunted them since childhood. The realization was bitter and sharp. Their father had chosen discretion over action, image over honesty, and secrecy over protection. Harry's anger bubbled over. She warned him. She trusted him with this knowledge, and he buried it. 30 years of deceit, William. 30 years of hiding the truth from us. From the world. William's jaw tightened. He understood Harry's rage, yet he also recognized the complexity of their father's choices. The monarchy, the protocols, the intricate dance of image and perception, all of it had influenced the decision to conceal Diana's warnings. And yet, the personal betrayal could not be ignored. The man they called father had chosen silence over safeguarding her legacy, leaving her children to uncover the truth decades later. The brothers began to dissect the letter line by line. Diana had included subtle cues about people she feared might act against her. She referenced meetings where conversations had been misrepresented, occasions where appearances were staged to manipulate public perception, and incidents where private actions had consequences far beyond what anyone realized at the time. Each warning illuminated the depth of her understanding, the breadth of her insight, and the calculated precision of her foresight. There were also moments of emotional vulnerability, raw admissions that made Harry and William pause. Diana wrote of loneliness, of isolation, of moments where she felt trapped and powerless. She acknowledged her fears candidly, without the filter of public persona, revealing a mother's deepest anxieties. And yet, even in these moments, she projected strength and foresight, leaving her children with the tools to navigate a world she could no longer protect them from directly. Audience, consider the courage required to write such words, to document fear, strategy, and guidance while knowing your own life is in danger, to anticipate consequences, predict human behavior, and leave behind a roadmap for those you love. How often do we even think about the legacies of knowledge parents leave, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be discovered? For Harry and William, this was not a hypothetical. It was reality, and it struck with a force they could not ignore. As they read further, the subtlety of Diana's coding became apparent. References to people, places, and events were deliberate, designed to convey meaning without explicitly naming those involved. She had mastered the art of concealment within communication, ensuring that the letter could survive scrutiny, yet still deliver vital information to those capable of understanding it. The brilliance of her foresight was undeniable, and yet it was underscored by heartbreak. She had done everything she could to warn them, and still, the power structures surrounding her had chosen silence over intervention. The emotional weight was almost too much to bear. Harry's hands shook as he held the letter. William's eyes were rimmed with tears. For decades, they had carried fragments of grief, questions without answers, and a gnawing sense that something crucial had been withheld. Now the pieces were coming together, and the truth was both illuminating and devastating. The warnings Diana had left were not abstract. They were urgent, precise, and prescient, and the consequences of their suppression were undeniable. Finally, as they closed the letter, the realization hit with full force. The hidden warnings were only part of a larger puzzle. There were implications far beyond what was written, connections that would have ripple effects throughout the family, the monarchy, and the public. Secrets that had been suppressed for decades were now exposed, demanding reckoning, clarity, and action. And in that moment, both Harry and William understood that uncovering the letter was only the beginning. But what came next, hinted at in the coded language and subtle references, would reveal a betrayal so profound it would shake the very foundation of their understanding of their family. And it was a betrayal neither brother had expected. What happens when the very walls meant to protect you become instruments of betrayal? Harry and William had long understood the concept of royal protocol, the layers of tradition, secrecy, and hierarchy that governed their lives. But nothing could have prepared them for the revelations hidden within Diana's letter. The more they read, the more it became clear. The betrayal was not a single act, not a fleeting moment of misjudgment. It was systematic, calculated, and deliberate, stretching across years and involving people they had been taught to trust implicitly. Harry's anger was immediate and palpable. His voice echoed in the room as he exclaimed, "This wasn't just neglect. This was manipulation. This was deliberate. How could anyone, how could he, allow her to live like this?" William, trying to maintain composure, responded quietly, his words heavy with gravity. "It's worse than that, Harry. This betrayal isn't just about her. It's about us, the family, the monarchy itself. It's institutionalized." The room, normally a place of decorum and restraint, seemed to vibrate with the weight of truth finally being confronted. The letter described individuals who had played dual roles in Diana's life. Trusted confidants who secretly acted in their own interests, aides who balanced loyalty to the crown with personal ambition, and advisors who concealed crucial information under the guise of protection. These were the people the brothers had always assumed were on their mother's side, yet Diana's words painted a different picture. She knew who could not be trusted, Harry muttered, scanning the passages again. She saw the alliances, the hidden agendas, and we had no idea. Audience, imagine discovering that the people you rely on most, those closest to you, those sworn to protect and serve, might have their own agendas. That trust, the very foundation of relationships, had been weaponized against someone you loved deeply. How would you process that? Could you forgive, or would the betrayal burn too deeply to ever heal? For William and Harry, the answer was complicated, heavy, and emotionally exhausting. The layers of deception revealed in the letter were staggering. Diana detailed instances where information had been deliberately withheld, decisions manipulated to isolate her, and circumstances arranged to undermine her credibility. Every word suggested that what appeared to be ordinary events, miscommunications, missed meetings, mismanaged security, were in fact orchestrated, part of a broader strategy to control her, her image, and ultimately her voice. The emotional resonance of these revelations left both brothers stunned. Harry's hands shook as he read the sections describing how her fears had been dismissed by those meant to support her. William, typically measured and calm, clenched his jaw, a silent acknowledgement of the anger, grief, and betrayal coursing through him. This was not just about secrecy or protection. It was about power, control, and manipulation at the highest level. And the truth, long buried, was finally being illuminated. The more they uncovered, the clearer the betrayal became. It was a betrayal that transcended individual actions and spoke to systemic issues within the monarchy, protocols designed to preserve image over truth, traditions that prioritized hierarchy over honesty, and decisions made to maintain appearances even at the cost of human well-being. Diana's letter had revealed that her life had been influenced by a network of people who had chosen self-interest over protection, compliance over courage. William spoke slowly, carefully, each word weighted with meaning. She was never alone in seeing this. She understood the system, understood the people, but she also understood that speaking out could make things worse. And he allowed it to happen. Harry's face twisted in anger. Allowed it? He buried the letter. He ignored her warnings. He let her navigate this minefield without support. It's betrayal, plain and simple. Audience, consider what it means when betrayal comes not from strangers, not from enemies, but from those entrusted with your safety. How does one reconcile love, duty, and betrayal all at once? How do you honor the memory of someone who foresaw danger while contending with the knowledge that it could have been mitigated by those closest to them? These are the questions Harry and William faced in that vault, questions with no easy answers. The letter went further, detailing moments where Diana had felt isolated and unheard. It spoke of strategic attempts to control her actions, to limit her influence, and to shape her narrative in ways that would serve the interests of others. She had documented subtle betrayals, calculated omissions, and manipulations that had been invisible at the time but devastating in retrospect. Each revelation added to the growing understanding that the betrayal was comprehensive, systematic, and personal. Harry's voice rose, almost shaking with fury. We've been living under the consequences of their decisions for decades. Every public appearance, every private moment, all influenced by the people who betrayed her. And now, we have to reckon with it. William nodded, a mixture of sorrow and determination etched into his face. Yes, but we also have to understand it, to navigate it carefully. Exposing it isn't just about anger. It's about truth, justice, and honoring her legacy. Audience, think about the delicate balance between justice and strategy. How often do we uncover truths that demand action, yet fear the consequences of revealing them? Harry and William were in that exact position, forced to weigh decades of secrecy, betrayal, and emotion against the potential fallout from uncovering truths that many would rather remain hidden. And then came the most gut-wrenching realization. The betrayal wasn't limited to the people Diana had anticipated. The vault, the hidden documents, and the letter itself suggested complicity at the very top. The one person they had expected to protect her, to act decisively, to prioritize her safety above all else, had chosen concealment. The very foundation of trust within their family had been undermined by the one person whose judgment they had believed could not fail. Harry slammed his hand onto the table, his anger spilling over. She warned him. She trusted him. And he chose silence. 30 years, William. 30 years. William, trying to remain composed, looked at his brother with fierce intensity. And it's not just about anger. It's about understanding the system, the choices, and the consequences. She prepared us for this, but he never gave us a chance to act sooner. The betrayal was a living, breathing force in that room, palpable, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Every document, every sentence in the letter, every line of foresight served as a reminder of what had been taken from them, not just the time with their mother, but the ability to respond, to protect, and to act on knowledge that could have altered their lives and hers. Audience, imagine carrying the weight of betrayal compounded over decades. Imagine learning that the very person you trusted most had deliberately concealed critical truths from you, choosing control over transparency. How would that change your understanding of your family, your past, your identity? For Harry and William, the answer was visceral, overwhelming, and life-altering. But what came next, hinted at in the margins of Diana's words and the hidden patterns in the vault, would reveal that this betrayal went even deeper, a secret so insidious it would shake the very core of their understanding of loyalty, love, and the monarchy itself. What would you say to someone who betrayed the person you loved most? How do you confront a father, a king, a man entrusted with your mother's safety, knowing he deliberately concealed truths that could have altered the course of her life and yours? For Harry and William, standing face-to-face with King Charles after uncovering Diana's letter was an experience that no words could have fully prepared them for. It was a confrontation decades in the making, an emotional collision between grief, anger, and the desperate need for answers. The first time they saw him after the discovery, the air felt charged. The usual formality of the palace corridors, the polished floors, the distant hum of staff, the sense of rigid control, seemed to shrink, leaving only the three of them in a tense, almost claustrophobic room. Charles, as always, carried himself with a calm, measured demeanor, but the cracks were already visible. He had known the contents of the letter, the warnings Diana had left, and the magnitude of what had been suppressed. The weight of decades of secrets hung between them. Harry's voice was the first to break the silence, tight with emotion, almost shaking. Why? Why did you hide it? She trusted you. She trusted you with her fears, her life, and you buried it. William's tone was steadier, colder, cutting through the room with measured precision. We've read her words, Father. We've seen what she feared, what she tried to protect us from. And yet you chose silence. You allowed her to be isolated, to be vulnerable, to face dangers that could have been mitigated. Explain that. Charles's response was cautious, almost rehearsed. He spoke of responsibility, of the pressures of monarchy, of the need to maintain stability and manage narratives carefully. But his words rang hollow to Harry and William. Each explanation seemed to skirt the fundamental betrayal. The deliberate choice to conceal a mother's warnings from her children, the choice to prioritize image over honesty, protocol over protection. Every sentence he spoke seemed to add layers to the emotional storm swirling in the room, amplifying the anger, grief, and disbelief already present. Audience, think about the challenge of confronting someone you once trusted implicitly, someone whose actions, or inactions, changed the course of your life forever. How do you reconcile love with betrayal, authority with responsibility, duty with justice? Harry and William were forced to navigate this emotional minefield, while the very man responsible for the concealment sat mere feet away. As the confrontation continued, the brothers recounted specific passages from Diana's letter, pointing out instances where she had predicted the consequences of inaction. They highlighted the coded warnings, the subtle references to individuals who might act against her, and the foresight that could have prevented emotional and reputational damage. Harry's voice broke again as he read aloud one line. She knew, and he did nothing. William's eyes, sharp and unflinching, met Charles's. Do you understand what that means, Father? That she anticipated danger and you chose to conceal it? That your inaction is part of the legacy we now have to reconcile with? Charles listened, his usual composure faltering under the weight of decades of suppressed truth and the raw, unfiltered anger of his sons. For the first time, the carefully curated image of a calm, measured monarch was challenged not by the press or public opinion, but by the very sons he had guided, influenced, and yet, arguably, misled. The room was a crucible of emotion, a collision between past decisions and present consequences, where every word carried the weight of decades-long betrayal. Harry's hands trembled as he gestured to the letter, almost as if it were a weapon. She documented everything, every fear, every manipulation, every betrayal. And all those who were supposed to protect her, the very people she trusted, kept silent. Why? Why did you allow that to happen? William's tone, though controlled, carried an edge sharper than any blade. We trusted you. We looked to you for protection, guidance, and transparency. And instead, we find a vault full of secrets, a letter buried for 30 years, and a betrayal that reaches to the very top of our family.